I hope you can hear me okay. I'm outside right now, and I just wanted to share some one particularly very intense feeling, spiritual experience I've had because of this war, and how the Lord met me in that, and some assurances that He gave me. You know, I've never had a lot in my life before, these experiences where evil is allowed to triumph. Like, evil is allowed to triumph over and over and over. I don't know that I had a childhood that really prepared me for that, or even a Christianity that prepared me for that, when in the world evil is allowed to triumph. I think I had a lot of assumptions about, God making things right and things like that. But I want to talk about what happened to me a couple months ago when Ukraine had... we were here in Poland, and Ukraine had run out of air defense, so a particular type of air defense, and Russia started using these missiles that they no longer have a lot of defense against. And it's been happening now for a long time, but the very first time it happened, I woke up, and that it was a Sunday morning, and I felt like I had been forgotten, like God had abandoned Ukraine, because evil is allowed to triumph. Just plain and pure evil that is killing and destroying is just being allowed to triumph. And I had this very bizarre spiritual experience where I felt like God had left and didn't care, and people didn't care. And I went to church that morning at the Polish church that we attend, and it was sometime during that service where the Lord just, I don't even remember how it happened, but this assurance came to me, this assurance that my reaction to the apparent triumph of evil, that my reaction was a lie. It was a lie. And I had to believe that God cared, and that God is here, and that people care. And I started thinking about all the people who do care. They might not be able to send the right type of missiles, but they care, and they pray, and they tell me about this. And I realized that I had to not let my heart listen to lies when something appears to be one way, like it appears that Ukraine is abandoned, but really they're not abandoned. And so shortly after I had that experience, we were actually in Ukraine at a wedding, and I sat afterwards at the dinner. I sat at this table, and I was sitting next to a man who was a volunteer chaplain in the Ukrainian army. And I started talking with him, and I just shared with him this exact thing. I told him how I had had this experience, and how I had felt like, we were forgotten. But really we weren't forgotten, and how he needed to tell people this, that he needed to tell, the soldiers that nobody has forgotten. People are praying. And he really thanked me for that message, and he talked about how easy it was to despair and to think that nobody wants to hear about it anymore, and that, nobody cares anymore, and we're forgotten. And I'm thankful that I got to tell him that. And I want to just tell that to all Ukrainians. Sorry, I'm reading my notes. I made little notes because I don't want to forget something. But I want to tell that to Ukrainians, that you're not forgotten, that God has not forgotten, that God sees all the suffering, and that people also care. Like, people truly care about Ukraine and care about what's happening and pray for Ukraine. And like, as individual people, this is something that's so much greater than any of us can stop or do, and why we might not understand why God is allowing it. But I want to share one other little thing that kind of had been in my mind. I've been studying the book, going through a study on the book of Revelation, and I was so interested, like, early on in that book, there's this scene where there are martyrs under the altar. I don't understand like what it actually looks like, but there are martyrs under the altar, and they like say, "How long, God, how long?" And I was thinking about how in America, we're often taught to like fight for justice and right will prevail, and like to do things. These martyrs are suffering like great injustices, and more people are being killed, and they're asking for justice. And it's so interesting to me that they're told to rest a while longer. Rest. They're told to rest. And I don't mean that we should just lay around and not do anything, but I took that word rest, and I just put it in my heart, and I just thought, there's so much I can't control about what's going on right now, about these huge and terrible things, but I can act and live from a place of peace and rest, because there are some things that need justice from other governments and from God that they're not in my control, and I can have a heart of rest and peace in these terrible, upsetting times. And then I wanted to talk a minute about God's sovereignty, because this has come up multiple times. Do you question if God is good or why he allows this to happen? And I just want to tell you the answer that God had given me, like even before this war started, and it's held me through the war. When evil is happening and God could stop it and he doesn't, it does not make him guilty for that evil. And that is just a bottom line fact that we have to start with. God allowing evil doesn't make him guilty of that evil. And you have to start with that presupposition. And I often think about, the evil things that, he made us people. He made us people who can choose. And if he did not intervene, this is what our whole world would be. It would be war and terror, and the greatest evil that we could ever imagine would just be continually happening. And God intervenes on so many levels. Like God intervenes and doesn't let us live to the full extent of our evil. But the evil that he does allow, it doesn't mean that he's guilty, because he hasn't stopped it. So I just wanted to that should comfort us. Like God is good, he's good, all good and all powerful, and he still is that. Like for some reason he allows this level of evil, and he has purposes in it that we don't understand, and just have to submit to his sovereignty and his will that he's allowed this to happen. And just that he's not guilty. He's a holy, pure, and good God who always acts in righteousness, and he's the only one that can save us from these terrible things. And if we cut off God by blaming him, then we cut off our own ability to be saved, and our own ability to be saved from these evil things that are in our own hearts. So I just want to encourage us to keep on in our faith and in our prayers and in living as people of peace, no matter what is going on around us. Those are some of the intense spiritual experiences that I've had. Not all of them, but some of them that I've had just recently even. So thanks for listening.